Hello everybody and welcome to the Way We Work webinar series, and this week we'll be looking at webinars that will explore current and future trends in testing and I'll say that again, current and future trends in testing. Yesterday we had a webinar with Graham Thomas and Phil Isles that looked at programming for testers. We had an ebook as well we gave away on this topic from both Graham and Philip. And today we're going to be looking at DevOps with Rob Lambert and his team at the NewVoiceMedia UK. And the title of their webinar is How is Testing Different in a DevOps Agile Team? Perspective from the team. If you have any questions for the guys over in NewVoiceMedia, you can type them into the questions field on your control panel. And at the end of the webinar, then we will go through as many of these questions as we can. We're running a competition all week where we will be giving away a free ticket to the conference to the lucky winner. And what we're doing is, at the end of each webinar, we'll have a number that you have to add up from each of the webinars. So if you want to get yesterday's webinar number, you can just, it's over on Test Huddle. You'll find it in the forums there. And I will give you today's number at the end of this webinar. And you'll have another webinar number tomorrow and Friday too. So now at this point, I'm going to hand you over to the guys over in NewVoiceMedia. So over to you guys.
So hi there everyone, just going to bring the slides up. Okay, fingers crossed you can all see these now. Okay, so hi, my name is Rob Lambert. I'm engineering manager here at NewVoiceMedia. I'm joined today in the room by a number of the test team, so I'm just going to rattle through the names, but you will get to meet these people later. They're all going to have a little bit of this webinar. So we've got Silvio, we've got Chris, we've got Alex, I've got Beth, I've got Kevin, and I've got Dan. You might know a few of these from Twitter, you might know a few of these from the speaking circuit also. So who are NewVoiceMedia? So NewVoiceMedia, we provide a contact center service up in the cloud. We're in the moment in kind of a very interesting sort of industry where there's lots of innovation, lots of disruption going on, and we're hoping to be, well, we are one of the main players in this industry. So I'm going to talk you through the kind of journey that we've been on for the last couple of years, and if you've been on the EuroSTAR website, if you've been to any of the EuroSTAR events, you've probably heard me already talking about this. So yearly releases to weekly releases. This is the one that I did a keynote on at EuroSTAR last week, that'd be nice, last year. And it's really the sort of journey that we went on the first few years. So we went from releasing once a year to releasing weekly. At a high level, we did this by moving dev and test together to create dev, which is kind of a weird thing, but you know, we broke down that initial silo. So the reason I'm here now talking about DevOps is that's kind of the evolution, that once you've kind of got dev and test working together in a very agile environment, the next step really is to move from that evolution from development, handing over the wall to the operations team to blend those two kind of activities together. So that's where we're at in our journey at the moment. So we're in DevOps. I'm not going to focus too much in this webinar on the actual mechanics of DevOps and the pipeline, because this is really about testing, but we're going to hand over to the team in a few minutes to find out how their world has changed as a tester when you find yourself testing in one of these sorts of environments. So why do we do it? We do it really to reduce feedback loops. So one of the core things is if you're going to build something, you really want to get feedback on that thing that you're building as quick as possible, ideally from the people using it in a very safe manner. So we build it, we test it, we deploy it, we just make sure that we're building the right features and that we're adding value constantly for our customers. And then we can fine tune based on that feedback. We can take the product in a different direction, or we can tweak the service in some way, shape or form to make it more suitable for the needs of our customers. So during this webinar, one thing that I will point out is we're running a poll, and I think Dara is going to be sort of sending this out in a minute. So we're going to ask two questions: is do you work in one of these agile environments, or do you work in the kind of next evolution, which is the DevOps environment? It'd be really interesting at the end to see the sort of numbers of the people we've got working in those two different environments. Presumably, if you don't work in either of those, there might be an option on there. If not, just don't answer it. So we'll also encourage you to ask lots of questions. We've already had a load of questions come via email from Twitter. We've also had a couple posted up into the Test Huddle. Please do also put your questions into the webinar. We're keen to try and answer anybody's sort of questions they've got around what it's like to work in DevOps, and we're keen not to talk too much about how good and cool it is to work here, because it is good and cool, but at the same time we want to make sure it's valuable for you guys listening to this. Okay, so that's enough of me. I don't want to take up too much of this webinar. This is really an opportunity for the guys here to share and hopefully for you guys to understand what it's like to work in this sort of environment. So I'm going to hand over to the team. You get to meet them all. We're hopefully going to keep each one of these bits to sort of 1 to 2 minutes each. So I'm going to start with Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia. I'm a senior tester at NewVoiceMedia. I've been here a year. I've been a tester for about 5 years. My background is come from an analysis and development background and some customer services. My previous roles were a mixture of waterfall and agile teams. And both of them, the dev, test and product owner people were co-located, but the ops departments were physically elsewhere. One of the companies released quarterly and the other one was monthly. The stories were always fully written before the dev and test people saw them by the business analysts. They were often very large with no acceptance criteria. Development time did often overrun and testing time was often squeezed because of that. We did have some pairing between dev and test on dev environments, but often all the completed dev work was passed to test for us to go and do our magic on it. A typical day for me at NewVoiceMedia on my team, we work in a scrum band way where we have scrum ceremonies of stand-ups, retros and sprints, and that's including a team stand-up plus a DevOps one. But then we pull our work rather than work to committed sprints. We have dedicated time every day for 3 Amigos chats with our product owners, devs and tests get together with story kickoffs and bring in ops and DBAs if we need to. We do exploratory testing on whatever current stories we've got, and that will begin with pairing on a dev environment with the devs, and then either Alex and I pairing on staging later on. And throughout the whole week or day, we're always looking for ways to improve our processes in our team and in the wider MVM environment.
Okay, cool. So one thing when we mention MVM, it's NewVoiceMedia. For those of you that we sort of slip into jargon and lingo every so often. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris Sims.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a senior test engineer also, and I've also been here just over a year. Before that, I've worked in various environments, marketing environments, bespoke CMMS, health and safety, and kind of QTP, kind of test factory environment, all of which were either strictly waterfall or waterfall-esque. So this is actually my first agile workplace. The difference working here is, from a testing point of view, mainly the conversations and the communication that you get and you need to do your job, and sort of a better pacing of the nature of the work that we do. So it essentially isn't all bottled up into one big lump. So for our team, it's fairly similar. We kick off an epic. All associated parties get involved. We bring the testers in, the coders, the product owner. A great opportunity to be a part of identifying high-level design problems. So we break our epics down into sensible stories, and before they're picked up by coders, we have kickoff meetings. So that's identifying our acceptance criteria, organizing automation, identifying problems, discussing the nature of the story, identifying areas of known desired behavior, anything that requires exploratory testing, which helps give the coders more direction. It gives them an understanding of what we're going to do with their work, and therefore hopefully they'll build those possibilities in mind. And after that we test either singular or in pairs, write up our notes, and that's about it.
Cool, thanks Chris. So next up is Beth.
Hi, my name's Beth. I've been with NewVoiceMedia now for close to 3 years. Before NewVoiceMedia, I worked for a large mobile phone company testing embedded apps, so there is a huge difference between what I was doing previously and what I'm doing now. Where I was before, I also had a healthy interest in the delivery and release chain, and I've been able to extend that here whilst at NewVoiceMedia. Agile is very different to my previous experience. There's an awful lot more collaboration that goes on daily, and that's not just within your team / developers / other testers. This is, you have an extended circle of colleagues in ops, and by working alongside these people, you understand the tools that they're using, the logging and the monitoring tools, perpetually learning. So I sort of tried to describe a day in the life of a tester here is a sort of jack of all trades and master of quite a lot of Yeah.
Cool, thanks Ben. So next up is Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a test engineer here at NewVoiceMedia. I've been a tester for 5.5 years. I've been at NewVoiceMedia for 1.5. Previously worked in a company where we were kind of coming out of waterfall, moving towards agile, but very in its infant stage. The deploys were intended every 3 to 6 months, but realistically they were 9 to 12 months as a number of rollbacks, and there was pressure to develop and fit it into these 3 to 6 month windows. There was always corners cut and processes overlooked, and a lot of the time it felt like testers were seen as a bottleneck to live. So the difference here has been it's a completely different way of thinking. The whole process, the whole DevOps and higher up and other areas of the company kind of buy into the ideology of working together, collaborating from its story in its infancy to live and helping agree on the functionality and build the right thing essentially to reduce failure demand later on. Average day would be, as Sylvia said, we work on the same team, but kind of looking at the stories, working on dev machines, trying to limit the WIP and keep everything flowing through by pulling it through instead of it being pushed in from other areas, and just generally testing. That's a great end.
Thanks Alex, good stuff. So Kevin's next.
Hi, I'm Kevin Harris. I've been at NVM for just over 4 years now, and I've been testing for about 16 or 17 because I'm that old. This is my third Agile company, but I've seen over the years that Agile has changed over the years. So even though 8 or 9 years ago I was doing 2 weekly releases in an Agile team, this is much more focused on the amount of input the whole team puts into the entire development process, and I think we're getting better at that. We're definitely the best company I've worked for doing that, and I think we're improving as we go along as well. We're constantly learning, as one of the others has already said. Typical day for me is pretty much what we've already heard. The only difference I'd say is that my team is actually half of us are here in the UK, and we have 2 developers in the team who are in Poland. And that actually works okay. They work the same hours we do, and we pair up with them, we do demos with them, we do kickoffs with them. We've got our communications down pretty good. So even though it's not quite as good as if they were in the office, it's still, we've got it working, so it's pretty well, and it works. It's a good team structure that we have.
That's cool, thanks Kevin. And for those of you that are getting to EuroSTAR this year in Maastricht, you might get an opportunity to see Kevin because he's speaking there, as is Raji, one of our other testers who couldn't make it to the session today. So next up, Dan Billing.
Hi there. I'm Dan Billing, and I'm a senior test engineer here at NewVoiceMedia. I've been a tester for about 15 years, and I've been at NewVoiceMedia for just over 2 now. So from a sort of daily life point of view, I'm lucky enough to work on the team with Chris, so a lot of what he says already stands, and I also work very closely with Kevin as well on PCI and security side of things. Most of my work is focused on the NewVoiceMedia platform as a whole rather than specific features. And my main focus is on the application security and compliance with various regulations that we have to adhere to. I also consult and support and train other members of the team on their security testing needs. I've worked in a lot of waterfall environments and agile environments over the time I've been a tester, and in some places with no process at all, and kind of agree with Kevin in that it's probably the best place I've worked at in terms of getting stuff live and well supported and well tested in a good fashion. So it's a great experience to have been here the last couple of years doing that with this team. And that's me, thanks.
Cool, thanks Dan. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of introduction to kind of the team that we've got. And there's obviously a lot more testers in our team, but we don't want to get everyone in the room today. And hopefully that's given you sort of a quick view of sort of day in the life of a tester. Hopefully we'll also answer some of those questions that you might have as we go through the next set of slides. So moving on, the big question that most people ask when we talk about DevOps, ignoring the big DevOps pipeline, we're only going to focus here on the sort of development stuff that we do. But what does a dev process look like? Some of you may have seen this slide before because I presented it at EuroSTAR, and I did a webinar last year that talked roughly about the same sort of stuff as we're going to talk about now. So we look at our development process kind of like an in-out process. So stuff comes in, we've got ideas, we've got requirements, we've got suggestions, we've got work basically that comes in. And it's our sort of job as a team to sort of take that work, break it down, define the scope of the work and define the scope of the testing, which is the key bit we're going to talk about in a minute. And then really what goes out at the other end is a completed story. So this is work in a kit, ready to go into production, hopefully in the next one, which is weekly. We'll also generate some exploratory testing notes, some documentation, and product owners will hopefully sign this off. And I'm hoping that the team are going to chip in here and talk about some of the techniques that we do around some of these little bits. They're all shaking their head, but I'm really confident they will. But really the two overriding goals that we have as a development team, these are kind of the ethos, the kind of things that we aim for, is number one, to always improve this process. So as I've drawn it out here, this was a drawing from about a year and a half ago. It doesn't really represent what every team does, but it gives you kind of a boiled down gist of what we do. And we're always improving this process, so whenever we find something that didn't work or could be optimized, we try to improve it. And number two is we always try to reduce the cycle time. So the cycle time is from when something comes in to when something goes out. Because we release weekly, we're trying to get that cycle time down to something sensible, like less than 5 days. Reality is some teams have got cycle times of 1 or 2 days. Some teams have got cycle times of a little bit more than that. But the goal is to be always reducing the cycle time, but sticking to the values and making sure the quality is still there. So when a story comes in, we, as a team, break that down, and maybe Alex and Sylvia want to talk about the Three Amigos process that they use.
Yeah, we use Three Amigos extensively in our team. We have dedicated time twice a day slotted in our calendars to use for Three Amigos if we're needing to pull another story. So there's a very high level of collaboration between the product owner, dev, and tester throughout the whole life of that story. And what we've found is that, well, the end result for me is I very rarely raise a bug in our tracking tool because we've sorted them out before code's even written most of the time. The end result of Three Amigos that I've noticed since being at NewVoiceMedia is everyone on the team understands the business impact of the stories and what we're trying to achieve. We understand what's in scope and what isn't, and what the acceptance criteria actually are, because we note those down, we write them down during our story chats. We understand how we're going to test it and whether we need dev help to build up some sort of testing mocks or not, or what challenges we're going to face with testing it. And really importantly, we uncover lots of unknowns where we find we're going to have to go and speak to the ops people or the DBAs or other feature teams and find out how our changes are going to affect their part of the product.
I found that the Three Amigos was also a great entry point for, because obviously we're doing, we mentioned about the Kanban style, but to have a limited whip, if you enforce the Three Amigos, it stops developers going ahead and just kind of cherry picking stories from the backlog. So if you have a gate and use the Three Amigos as a gateway, have it as a column on the board, it helped us.
Our workflow.
Yeah, helps our workflow massively.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Three Amigos is obviously brings the Three Amigos really the product owner, the tester, and the developer.
Three different voices, yeah.
Yeah, 3 different voices, all making sure they understand the story, so there's no surprises. Like, here's a new story in test, and the tester's never seen it before. So that's one of the mechanisms that we use to do that. So thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Alex. So one thing we try to do is we try to get some Selenium sort of UI testing around the story. Generally kind of happy path. We want to make sure that the users are going to get a good time of it and that consistently works. So that when we change something, we're going to get a failure in that test if it's not being updated. We do heavily try to do BDD with SpecFlow, and the developers are very good at doing the TDD stuff as well. We try to push all of our automation really to the lowest point possible, just so that it's easier and quicker to run, and it's also a lot easier for people to understand what we're actually testing here as well. Exploratory testing, I know Kevin's going to talk about that in a minute on a separate slide, but really between the team, they're defining the scope of testing, and there'll always be those things that we just don't know the answer to. And that's really the exploratory testing that we do. If we know the answer to it, we try to get it automated, so it can become a check that we can just run again and again and again, and we'll talk a little bit about regression in this webinar also. But really fundamentally, the exploratory testing is the bit where these guys come alive, really. So this is the testing that we like to do the most of here, is what I actually hire for as a manager, is we look for people who are good at this exploratory testing. And we also have this thing at the bottom called test cases. We really, really don't like those. We define test cases as a check that we're going to want to run again and again and again. Really, we want to try and get that automated, but occasionally we do have one or two things that we can't automate. We just have to kind of live with that, excuse me, until we get some more automation in place, or we can solve that problem some other way. So the stuff that comes out at the end, the exploratory testing notes are very personal notes. You know, these aren't things that we distribute. Each tester will store their notes in a completely different way. Alex is going to touch on that a little bit later on, hopefully. And then the documentation, the teams really are responsible for kind of writing the documentation before handing that over to the technical author, who then puts it into the house style and makes sure that obviously the documentation goes out with the new features. Like I say, we do have occasional test cases, but we really, really don't like those. They're the ones that we really try to automate if we can. Okay, so moving on, exploratory testing. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, who's going to talk a little bit about how we do exploratory testing.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So one of the things that you've probably noticed from the way we're talking is that each of our teams, even though we have the same basis of the way we all work in a different way. That's for various different reasons. Each of our team have different bits of the software that we work on, but also not only is the team different, but testers are different. Testers don't always see it the same way, don't have the same ways of working. For example, when we're doing notes and things, some people use mind maps, some people still use pen and paper, some people use Excel or Word. And we realise that testers are all different and have the ways that they kind of optimise their testing. And so we try and embrace that as opposed to have a strict regime in place that everybody has to follow. And that's kind of one of the ideals that we work to. So for exploratory testing, as Ross mentioned, we try and, before we've even started testing, as the story comes in, we'll have actually said generally what our checks will be, what the things that we will definitely be testing. So hopefully that will be automated, and even before the software has actually got to us in test, that will all have been checked already. So when it actually gets onto our test system, there shouldn't be any need for that kind of thing, apart from just ensuring that the deployment has worked okay. After that, it's basically exploring the software, seeing what the differences are. So what we usually do is we usually start off with a charter. Again, each person, each team will work in a different way, will have different kinds of charters. And they will usually have been discussed with the team before we even started. And also we will have done demos on the developer machines, we'll have worked on their VMs, so that everything else should have been already checked before it actually gets onto the test system. We're not expecting any kind of surprises of things not working that were the obvious stuff from the start. So we have a basic set of guidelines. We kind of have a similar place to put all our results, but the way we actually put down our notes is individual to each team, to each tester. We have feedback so that within each team, and sometimes cross-team as well, after you've explored, you can explore either by yourself or in pairs. Again, that's each tester's preference, and also depending on what story you're working to. So we'll have done the testing, and then we'll have feedback sessions where we'll talk to another tester about our testing, go through our notes, and just ensure that they're happy that we've covered everything they believe we should do. And we do that for every single exploratory testing session we do, and then we have a central depository to put all our notes, and we kind of have a feedback mechanism for just showing where we've tested and how we've tested. And that's probably a good overall view of how we've exploratory testing.
Absolutely. So I remember presenting this once a company that said that just sounded like chaos. And the team was struggling to sort of, I guess, move away from this idea that everybody had to use the same mechanisms. And from my point of view, as long as the results all end up in the same place, and we share those with the team in terms of, you know, what bugs did we find, what questions do we have, you know, what did we test. As long as they're in the same format at the end of it, the making notes bit, the storage of that is really kind of up to the tester. Although Alex, I think Kevin stole a little bit of Alex's thunder, but Alex is going to talk about the sort of charter process. Now, bearing in mind, like Kevin said, every team here is different. This is just one way that you're going to hear about how we currently solve this. And obviously, it'd be great to hear how other people solve this on the Test Huddle forum. maybe good to hear other people are solving these problems also. So over to you, Alex.
Cheers. So yeah, as Rob mentioned, every team's different, and me and Sylvia, we pair work. So basically what we do, our style is to use the mind map. The mind map is kind of a fundamental piece of how we generate our charters. So the mind map will be talked about and created at the initial story kickoff. We will then write down some ideas, some questions, and then we'll actually sit down with the developers and the product owner and make sure that, ask them if they've got any questions, or if we're looking at areas or that they think might need exploring. And so once we have that, we will then start looking at those areas and then write charters. So we will say, if you want to explore an area in a bit more detail, we will then create additional charters on that particular area. So given an area, and then you kind of what you want to be discovering, and as a kind of persona, so you can, I'm not really explaining this particularly well, but
yeah, so for our charters, for when I do mine, I will outline in general terms what part of the system I'm going to use and what I'm kind of looking for, which is often unexpected results, or does it behave as I expect it to, or does it generate unexpected errors, and I will allocate myself a persona, because I find when you put on a different hat, you use the system in a different way.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll be exploring as an architect of the system, using the system, someone who puts plans together, and sometimes it'll be as a caller, so a customer phoning into the telephones, and you're looking for different things.
It's definitely trying to get the scope, limit the scope. So that's the charter side. So once we have all the charters, as Kevin alluded to earlier, we will collate that on the wiki, and that allows the business to look at our charters, and we can also look at them later on, and we always have a 60-day rule where it's got to be readable after 60 days of not being able to look over it. So finally, then we have the results logged, and then we've got a graphing tool which looks at the charters in relation to the code check-ins. So that can give us a good basis for areas we may need to consider in regression testing.
One thing I'd add to what Alex said, in our team we share our charters and what we're planning to explore with the developers, which helps them think, oh, I need to go and check that before they check it on their environments before it's checked into our staging area. So we often find bugs on a development environment because we've shared what we're going to plan to test with them, which cuts down their cycle times and feedback loops, etc.
Absolutely. So we are very heavily influenced by Elizabeth Hendrickson's Explorer book. So we do sort of stick to the charter format of explore something with something to discover. But then obviously we're adding sort of personas and some of that stuff onto it. So Explore It by Elizabeth Hendrickson is a great book. Really, really good insights. So thanks, Alex. Thanks, Sylvia. So this is one of the questions that we got fired in via email, obviously before the webinar. So this one I think Chris is going to, or Sylvia's actually going to answer. So yeah. So how do you handle regression? So obviously if you're releasing weekly, you don't have the time. There just isn't physically enough hours in a day for a small team of testers to be manually, if that's the word we're going to use, and I hope that doesn't drive controversy, but if we're going to manually test this software. So I talked about this in my keynote last year. So there's a few options you can do. One is you can throw people at it, but fairly soon you're going to end up with a test team the size of a small country, and that's really not sustainable. The other route is to just not do it, which is frankly far too risky for most businesses, and that's not something we want to entertain. And then thirdly, we do it through lots of automation, which is hopefully what Sylvia's going to talk about now.
Yeah, as Rob mentioned, we release weekly, so it means we have to have a kit ready every week that's suitable to release. So we have a two-pronged approach. We've got all of our checks, or we hope all of our checks are automated, and then we manually explore around areas that we consider of risk in this particular kit. So the automation starts with unit tests. We've got thousands and thousands of automated tests. The unit tests are written by developers. On our team, as testers, we do have some input into those unit tests as well, because we talk about the testing scope quite in collaboration with the developers. And twice a day we have integration and UI automated tests that run on each build. Once a week, once we've picked our release candidate, we will then take that further with some manual exploratory testing. We try and concentrate on exploratory tests in those because we try very hard to automate checks. Sometimes they do come through though, but that's an area we're actively always trying to improve so that we can concentrate on exploratory manual testing, and to work out what to explore. Testers get together and have a chat about what's changed in this kit, what areas we think might be of particular risk or higher risk or lower risk, and come up with exploratory ideas to cover that. We assign roles of, this particular test is going to cover this particular area this week. We also allocate browsers so that we try and get a manual coverage of cross-browser testing to support the automated tests that run twice a day. That's it.
I guess it's worth pointing out that our regression testing is usually about half the team for about 2
Yes.
hours.
Yeah.
So it's not that long. It's in very short sessions for not all the testers.
We divide up the tasks between us, so there's not one person that's got the burden of it all. So we share that out quite equitably most weeks. So.
Yeah, and we rotate that as well.
Yeah.
It also means we've got representatives of each of the product area, so you've got quite a lot of knowledge there.
There are testers come to a meeting that we have each time we're about to plan it, and then we take ownership for our areas and talk about it and discuss those risks within the team. I find it a really good and useful way of doing it.
Good stuff. Excellent. And then we had another question come in, and this is quite timely actually, because I stuck a post up on my blog this week just before this question came in. But how do you get a job in Agile DevOps when you don't have the experience? It's one of those perennial questions you get asked at every conference. How do you find a company that values exploratory testing, etc.? How do you find a company that releases software frequently? There's all sorts of different sort of variants of this question. So I'm going to hand over to Chris now, who's got a few ideas for those of you that might want to try and find a job in Agile and DevOps, but you don't quite have that experience yet.
Cool. Well, I can't speak for everyone's experience, and everyone will have a different set of things to their context about where they are and when they want to get to. So I'll just sort of tell you my story. I had no Agile experience whatsoever before I came here, but I knew that I wanted to work for an Agile environment. So obviously, first of all, you're going to have to want to work in a place like that, because an employer will want generally the kind of people who want to work there. I had a degree, but it wouldn't have been necessary to have that degree to work here. I still have no testing certifications at all. I have, as I say, no history of working in Agile. But what I did have was an active Twitter feed, a blog, a presence on Software Testing Club forums and various other forums, LinkedIn, published articles, history of answering questions online. So I had a network of people who knew me, and a network of people who were aware of my reputation and interest and passion for testing. So once you have a sort of a nature of education, a demonstrable understanding of those facets of testing through education, through self-education, across the board, from philosophy through to C# and Selenium, then it's a lot easier to be seen. And when we have those kind of contacts, when you talk with people online about testing, it's much easier to be picked up and pick up those roles. As the testing role evolves, I think we're coming slowly to the understanding that unskilled testing, if you like, can be done and is being done by developers. As such, as it evolves in that direction, you need to become an expert at what you do. So you need to be able to deconstruct what you know and be able to rebuild it on evidence in a defensible way. Not to be able to say not only what you did and the fact that you did it, but why you chose to do it and what you chose not to do. And I think when you're both defensively valuable and suitably visible, that's when that recognition comes about, and then that's when the work came my way. And I say that is only one way to approach the problem. I'm sure there are other ones.
That's me. Cool. Does anyone else in the room want to sort of contribute to this question? How did you get an opportunity to start in your first agile DevOps team?
I'd like to throw it the other way around and just say what I look for when hiring people.
Go for it, absolutely.
One of the things I'd recommend is always be honest on your CV. If you go to a company that says they do agile, if you haven't done agile, don't put agile on your CV, because we find out very quickly who's just trying to put it on there just so I can get the interview, as opposed to the people who really have done it. We don't look for the people who've done agile. What we will look for are people who are enthusiastic about it, who want to learn about it. So if you haven't done it, don't put you've done it. Say you're enthusiastic about it. Read up about it beforehand. The other thing is that if you come into an interview or a telephone or face-to-face, we'll be looking for two things. We'll be looking at, number one, your communication skills. How do you react to other people? How do you get on with other people? Will they be able to understand you? Can you express your ideas so other people understand? It's the most incredibly important thing to have in our industry. And the other thing would be enthusiasm. Be enthusiastic about what you do and about what you want to do. So I'd go for those two things when you're looking for a role in these kind of industries.
Absolutely.
I can add a bit about what I did. I did things like I went to conferences, even if it meant going on my own, because nobody else from the company wanted to come. So it was to some of the agile conferences in London, things like QCup and the BDD Exchange. I go to meetup groups. There's in most towns will have some sort of tester or agile meetup group. Go to those. You meet other people. You find out all sorts of things there, and read. Books like the one Rob mentioned, Exploratory, or More Agile Testing, Impact Mapping, 50 Ways to Improve Your Tests, Bridging the Communication Gap. All of those kind of things really help you, even if you're not working in an agile environment at the moment. It helps you learn about them, so when you do come to an interview, you can show your enthusiasm, you can show you're interested, and willing to learn yourself and put time in yourself. Communication skills, agile really does involve a lot of collaboration and communication, so building up your own communication skills, being able to relate to people, being able to handle conflict, and quick changes at pace is really important. And the other thing I did was I interviewed the employers as much as they interviewed me, so ask questions. You can find out an awful lot from a 20-minute phone conversation about what the company is like themselves, and if it doesn't sound like it's going to be very agile, don't go. Be picky if it's what you really want.
Absolutely, sounds good. Excellent. So hopefully this. Oh, actually, sorry, we've got one more question, and this is kind of one of those questions that we chucked in there because it's a genuine question that came from somebody, but I think the answer really is, is testing really that different in DevOps? I think the answer really is no. It's still the same sort of testing. You're just doing it at a slightly different pace. You're doing it further forward in the kind of life cycle of software delivery, and you're doing it with a lot more collaboration, which I think is the key thing that we found. We talked a little bit about that just a minute ago. Anyone else in the room got a comment on that one?
Yeah, from a security testing point of view, I have to work very closely with our operations engineers as well as our development and other testing engineers, because they're the guys that support the network and support the patching of the servers and so on that our application sits on. So I have to work very closely with those people. From that point of view, it's very much a DevOps style of testing. It is very challenging, but again, it's not that too different from other, what I've done before, to be honest.
For me, the testing itself isn't really different. What's different is how soon you speak to people in other departments like operations or the people that are supporting the product in live. We speak to them at story kickoff stage or earlier.
To an extent, if you understand the nature of their role, it helps you understand blockers in your role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think Dan's trying to show me something on Twitter, but we'll come to that one in a minute. So I think for me, the thing really with DevOps is, the thing I found when I transitioned into this was I did a lot less testing in terms of sitting down and actually interacting with the software. I did a lot more collaboration, a lot more discussion, a lot more getting involved with the design and the actual implementation, and a lot less hands-on testing. But the testing that I did do hands-on was a lot more exploratory. and that was a big shift for me. So fingers crossed, we've met your expectations with this webinar. We obviously have 15-20 minutes or so to answer any questions that have come in. So right now I'm going to hand back over to Dara, and thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I hope it's given you some good insights, and feel free to continue the conversation on Twitter or on Test Huddle website, or obviously in the questions section now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for your presentation. One thing there, Rob, we never actually did was we never ran those polls. Would you like me to run them now?
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. I'll launch the first poll here now, and what we're asking you now is how many of you work in an agile environment? So if you just take a moment to tick the box that applies to you. We're up to 75% now of our audience have responded, so we're just going to give another 10 seconds. Okay, just close that and share the results. You can see there that 68% have said they do, and another 32% said they don't. Now, the next poll we have here, let me close that again, apologies. The next poll we're asking now is how many people work in a DevOps environment? Yes, 82% have replied. Give it another few seconds. Okay, let me close that poll as well. There's the results there now. 26% say they do, and 74% say they don't. All right, I'm just going to take back control of the screen here. I just have one or two slides to go through before we move on to the Q&A session here. Now, if you want to hear more from Rob Lambert, you can attend his sessions at EuroSTAR 2015. He has a tutorial on communication skills for testers. He's also got a track session on becoming a manager, some ideas for those who are new to management. We have an ebook as well for you all to download. I'm just sharing the link with you now. So in the chat box, you'll have a link that'll bring you through to the ebook. And there's a password there to download it. So it's just exclusive to you guys today. And the password is there on the bottom of the page if you want to take note of it. It'll be in the follow-up email that you'll receive after the webinar ends. But if you want to download now, it's all uppercase, BASNFYA, Build a Safety Net for Your Architecture 2015. Tomorrow's webinar is on Big Data and New Testing Challenge with Adam Knight, and you can register for that on the Test Huddle website /WayWeWork. Our super early bird rate, our discount ends on Friday the 18th. That's this Friday, and you can make savings up to €200 on your ticket, and make even bigger savings when you register a group, where you get one free ticket for every 4 attendees that you register. We also have a second conference running the week of EuroSTAR. It's called Mobile Deep Dive. It's a day-only mobile testing event, and you can find out more information about this event on the EuroSTAR website. Today's number in our competition is 30. If you want to add that with yesterday's number, you'll find that over on Test Huddle on the forum. Take note of those, and we'll have 2 more numbers for you to add up this week. Before you email your answers to me, I'll give you the email address at the end of the week, and you will be in the draw then to win a free ticket to the EuroSTAR Conference 2015. So finally, let's have a look at some of the questions that have come through here today. The first question we have here says, how long would you remain in devtest before transitioning from devtest to DevOps?
Okay, so all I can say is what kind of we did. So when I first joined, which was probably about 5 years ago, I was the only tester. in a team of about 7 or 8 developers. So immediately I was kind of overwhelmed with the sheer level of sort of code that was coming towards me. So one of the first things we did was push that straight back. So getting to the point where we were automating all of the, what now thanks to Michael and James and many others, called checking. So we were trying to push that back. So I wasn't checking the software to make sure it did what we said it was going to do. And instead I was free to explore and do the exploratory testing. I also took on the performance testing and all the other kind of aspects of it. Fairly soon though, thanks to a few circumstances with the business, we were given the opportunity to scale the team. And I hired some of the key members at that point that helped us to do that transition, people like Kevin, and there's a couple of other guys out in the team who are still here, and people like Beth, and some of the guys have been here for a long time now. We were in the dev test phase where we had dev and a separate test function for no more actually probably than about 5 or 6 months until we managed to sort of get those agile teams collaborating. So we rapidly moved into agile. We tried in the initial stages to adopt Scrum because basically that's what everyone says you should do. But it failed, just like I've seen it fail pretty much everywhere I've tried to do that. And we moved straight to basically Kanban, Scrumban as we call it, where we were doing basically prioritized work because we were moving at such a rapid pace. We had to make sure the next prioritized ticket that we were going to work on was the most valuable. So we had a product team built around that, and they started prioritizing all the work, and we just pulled the next story and pulled the next one. And we just kept doing that until we basically got to the scale of 2 or 3 different feature teams, and then we started having product owners for each of those, and basically that's how we scaled agile. It's difficult to say it's Scrumban. We call it NewVoiceMedia Agile just because each team is different. Some of them are really, really Kanban. Some of them are more on the edge towards the sort of Scrum aspect if you want to balance it that way. And some of the teams are probably fairly indescribable in terms of what they do, but they have a very effective process for what their team need and the cadence of their releases. So yeah, really dev and test being separate things was one of the first barriers I was determined to break down because it's one of the most one of those sort of barriers that really, really blocks the kind of collaboration that can really happen, and we desperately wanted to get to that sort of agile end of that spectrum. Hope that answers your question.
The next question I have here asks, what collaborative tools do you use in tracking your project work?
We use mind maps. Mind maps help instigate all the questions we need, really, all the way from the very, very beginning. So we will have a template that we use with a very scripted definition of done. So once we have all the ideas, all the acceptance criteria, all the bits and pieces you need on a story, the main tool that we use all the way through would be, as I said, the mind map. It just helps. It's a great tool because it's so lightweight. So it allows you to write key points without having loads of text. I found in my previous job when I was writing massive test cases, trying to get a developer to read them was nigh on impossible. So with the mind map, you can just bullet point it, and it's in a really digestible. It's very digestible for exposing to other parts of the team. And I think
it also means the devs contribute to our test quite a lot as well because they're happy to sit and look at a mind map, and they will say, we've also touched this area, we've refactored around this area, so you might want to check that. Alex and I use Evernote quite a bit for our recording our exploratory sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so generally we use tools like Jira and Confluence for the sort of documentation and the workflow. We use Hangouts and various different things to collaborate with remote workers, whatever works. We're quite heavily into the HipChat sort of integration as well. So yeah, a number of different tools, but fundamentally whatever works for the team is the best solution.
Sorry, the mind map tool name is XMind, in case anyone wants to know that one we use. So,
there's a variety.
yeah, the one. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. It says, I've never seen a good definition of DevOps. Can someone provide one or point to one online?
Yeah, the industry is yet to really sort of settle on something. Obviously, it depends who you speak to. There's a lot of opinions on what it should be. So our version of DevOps really is really about breaking down that barrier, reducing the cycle time, and increasing the collaboration between the development team and the teams that are doing the operational activities, so our operations team. Now what we're, obviously there's loads of different models you could go down. You could create a separate team in the middle that has the, some people from dev and some people from ops, and that's a good way to go. That's actually kind of the way that we're heading at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say that's definitely what we're gonna end up with. You can obviously go for the full thing where everybody in dev and ops all come together in one big room and kind of come together as a function. That can often be one of the hardest ones that I've seen, or you can actually have kind of the operational activities move into development. So that's a popular model for a lot of companies. So ours at the moment is kind of like blended in between. We're still on the journey, still early days for us, and we're still trying to work out what's best for our customers and what's best for NewVoiceMedia. But really DevOps is that next barrier of breaking down development and operations and that wall between the two.
I think our ceremonies, so our DevOps stand-up in the morning really helps with that. I don't attend every day. No, you do attend it every day, but that really helps. So you know where our work fits in with the overall operations life cycle and how the two things come together become one thing, which is a fantastic way of communicating.
Definitely, yeah. So I think there will always be discussions and controversy, just like there is over Agile. Nobody's yet come up with anything definitive that sums up every single way that Agile's been implemented across the world. So we're just heading down, again, we'll probably end up with NewVoiceMedia DevOps, which is just what we do.
It's probably worth talking about something like how we release to live, because that's kind of heavily influenced about how the way we want to work.
There's a huge collaborative process as well involving both sides.
Yes. Yeah, we don't hand things over.
No both sides.
No, we don't hand things over. It is a team made from people from development, that's developers and testers, and the people from operations as well, who work together as a team to release things.
The one kind of mission, shared mission, to deliver software to a live environment.
Yeah.
Everybody takes part.
We all take turns as testers to be part of that on a weekly basis. Someone is involved in the release, and someone coordinates that from a dev and test point of view and collaborates with the operations side of things. So it works well.
Cool. So I hope that goes some way to answering that difficult question.
Another question here asks, how long did it take from presenting the new approach to DevOps to implementing it? And they go on to say then developers can be resistant to change at the best of times.
Absolutely. So there was no real sort of presentation. It's that kind of evolution of the business where we just, in the early days when I joined as development director at the time, Nigel, who's one of our chief architects here and development manager, he and I kind of desperately wanted to fix development. So we wanted to get it away from doing yearly releases, where we were literally throwing the packages and installers over towards the operations team. And it kind of worked, and it got the business to where it was, but we wanted to try and evolve that slightly. So there was no real sort of presentation, here's what we're going to do. It's just that slow evolution of the right time and the right place, because we were quite small. And as we grew, we hired the people that shared that same vision. And that's fundamentally how we made it a success. Excuse me. So what we didn't have is the epic challenge that some companies have, where they have 100 people in the department who now we have to change everybody's way of working, which is really about changing hearts and minds more than it is the process. We were lucky that we had the small team and we were able to scale it upwards. As for how you do it the other way, there's lots of case studies on the internet. Each way is going to be slightly different. Fundamentally, not everybody's going to get it. So not everybody in the team will understand that this is what we need to do to be a successful business. Thankfully, like I say, in our situation, we were at the right place, right time. We were able to sort of grow it and scale it upwards, rather than have to go in and turn around a whole team.
I'd argue that I'm not resistant to change, actually.
No, but we've hired people that fit what we're trying to grow into, rather than having to. Yeah, I mean, there's still times when we sit in a retrospective, and everybody's not quite on the same ballpark and etc. But these are just the nature of working with people.
If you show the developers the value, if you do little experiments and show them the value, that's I think what we found is when they actually see the positive effects, then
they're happy to adopt
it. They try and make out it was their idea in the first place.
Hopefully none of the devs from Alex's team are listening to this. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, let's look at another question here. how would you change the code-first mentality of senior developers to get to a BDD approach? Sorry.
I mean, it is tough. In the early days, you know, when I first joined, it was a big culture shock to have a tester basically saying, I'm not going to test anything unless you've tested this yourself with automated tests. I mean, that was really the stance that we kind of took in the early days. Not as kind of hard line as that, but fundamentally that's the position that we pushed into. Really, again, I think it's like what Alex and Sylvia were saying. If you show people the value of it, it becomes just something people adopt. There's a very good article which I'll probably stick up on the Test Little forum later, where Seth Godin himself, the marketing kind of guru, talks about sort of an adoption curve where you have these people that are sort of like outliers, kind of a little bit on the fringe, and they adopt new things, and then it becomes slightly more appealing to those that are slightly risky in their approach, and then it becomes sort of almost like mainstream, and then at some point it just becomes the way that you operate. And that's what we've seen here is, you know, these little things that we bring in, these changes start as fringe things that one or two people are sort of experimenting with. Then we see the value, and then they become things that other people are willing to sort of adopt and think, well, you know, I'll give that a go. And then eventually it becomes the mainstream. I think the problem most people have when they're trying to move to agile is they try to go to the whole mainstream. Everybody's got to do this. And it's just almost impossible. You've got to start small group of people experimenting, see the value, prove the value, demonstrate the value, and then iterate through that at a bigger scale. And there's something really powerful about a programmer standing up at, for example, our show and tell, saying, this is what we do, and the other programmer's going, you know what, that sounds great. It's just one of those things, is that sort of, I guess that's sort of like, you know, credited to somebody who can talk their language, working in the same way. And the same with the testers. Testers are just as resistant to change as other people.
Can I chip in? One way I've found or seen that works really well is using your retrospectives for this. So when you've got a good Scrum Master running a retrospective, and if you bring it up as a something I'm longing for, or something I'm not happy about at the moment, and bring it up as in discussion. You know, you need to have a voice in your retro, not just sit quietly. And hopefully an action can come out of that to introduce a bit of an experiment and just try it and see for the next sprint. Start small like that.
So in my experience, one of the hardest things when I did a bit of consultancy for a while, it wasn't the developers. Developers were very open to improving the way that they work. It was the testers that were the most resistant. So as much as we occasionally in the test community like to give some grief to the devs, I think as well testers can be quite difficult to accept, you know, kind of what their role was going to change into in sort of agile and DevOps. Good question, thank you. Hope that answers it.
Okay, I think we're up to the hour mark now, so maybe we might just take one more question and leave it at that. And apologies for those of you whose questions we did not get around to yet. But let me just pick one more here at random. And it's a question here that asks, what purpose does a bug tracking tool play in DevOps? Do you still really need it?
Yeah.
I've got a thing I can offer there, and you've done your bit if you like.
Go for it, Dan.
Well, so from a security testing side of things, I'm security testing stuff at the moment that's quite old and legacy, and we're not actively developing in a lot of those areas. So I still have to log bugs there quite frequently. But what happens is after we do logging a lot of bugs, we triage them we have a bug triage process, which then puts them into a backlog of bugs that are going to get fixed within the feature teams, and then managed through that process. So that's how we use it, and if those bugs aren't relevant anymore, they just go the way of all flesh and get deleted.
Yeah, so I mean, it's still a useful tool. There's still bugs that you might not end up fixing. The reality is, you know, working with software is quite messy. The bug tracking tool is also really good for anyone working in a compliance environment, which we are. So it's good to keep an audit of it. The one sort of kind of caveat or rule that we have is if you're going to test on a developer's machine and you find something, there's really no point raising a bug ticket for that. Let's just fix it, deal with it. It's part of the design and build iteration. But as soon as it hits one of our staging environments, our test playground, so to speak, we want to see a bug report for that, just so we can track it through our process. We're going to make sure we're going to fix these things, and just to align expectations about what kind of bugs we're generating. But also the flip side of that is the measurements. We want to see how many bugs we're raising in sprint, because that gives us some idea as to whether or not we're missing things on our design, or we're not collaborating enough, for the testers and developers just not talking to each other. So the numbers that come out from the bugs are interesting. They don't always tell a complete story, so we need to be super careful about deducing too much from the bug numbers, but they can hint to places of collaboration or areas that are particularly gnarly, for example, in the code. So that's kind of what we use them for. They do still have a purpose.
I'd probably like to add that in previous companies it wasn't unusual to be raising 20 or 30 bugs a week. And here, when I first joined, we were probably raising maybe 5 a week, and now maybe 1, maybe 2 a week at the very most. We've kind of cut out that whole wait till it gets to test and then find the bugs. And that's one of the vast improvements of the way we work and the speed of what we work, is that bugs don't get into test anywhere near as often as they used to.
Cool, hope that answers your question.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all very much. Thank you to all of our presenters today from NewVoiceMedia, and as well thank you to all of our attendees for attending and all your questions. Much appreciated. If you want to register for our other 2 webinars this series, just go to Test Huddle and you'll see the link there. A recording of this webinar will be available on Test Huddle very shortly. And if you want to just continue on the conversation, if you want to post some more questions to the guys over in NewVoiceMedia, there's a forum created there, which Rob set up there recently. So just pop a few questions in there and we'll look at your feedback. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you all and take care.
Thank you.